A compliance analyst from a community bank gets this question first thing in the morning. Do we approve this wire transfer? Does it trigger our AML policy? It's a simple question, but the stakes are high because the information might be part of the BSA framework that the bank has set, or it might be part of the NCUA's supervisory letter from the last quarter, or it might be part of the risk framework that the bank has set, or it might be part of all three. This is the daily reality of the compliance analysts at banks. It's not that it's the lack of information, but it is the abundance of information that is scattered across dozens of documents and the lack of getting to that information quickly. That is a problem. Hey, if you are new to my channel, then my name is Prasad Kopanati. I am the founder of Spatial IQ, an AI solutions provider. I have been building custom AI solutions for the clients for the past 2 years. I have 22 years of experience in software engineering, from designing to building to maintaining the software. And the build process takes weeks, not months. All right, let's dive in. Before any AI enters into the picture, here is what the manual research workflow looks like. The analyst gets the question, they open the internal documents, they search, they scan for results, they find something but not relevant. So they go back and search again. If still that is not something they are looking for, they escalate to a senior colleague and they wait for the results. And this wait can be in hours or in days. So this process can take hours for a complex regulatory question, the kind that shows up before the compliance officer. This can take even days or more than that. Now, let me show you the scale of the problem that we're talking about. For this project, I used a corpus of 33 federal regulatory documents. Those documents translate into 304K of text, tokens of text, and that is equivalent to 1220 searchable charts. And these documents cover topics such as capital adequacy, PCA, BSA/AML, interest rate risk, commercial lending, HDMA, and trading. Each of these has its own regulatory universe with its own vocabulary, thresholds, and its own selection structure. Now let's look at one question, a typical question from a CCO. Our network just closed at 4.5% after unexpected loan losses. We have $8 million in a pool commercial loans ready to close. Does NCUA regulation require us to pause originations, or is that examiner's discretion? What becomes legally mandatory the moment we fall into the capital layer? Let's imagine is a question from CCO. The question spans 3 separate regulatory documents. They use completely different vocabulary, and an incomplete answer, one that gets 2 of the 3 requirements, right, is not a partial credit. It's a regulatory exposure. So getting the answer wrong or getting an incomplete answer that you don't know is incomplete has real consequences. Consequences such as NCUA examination findings, mandatory corrective action plans, regulatory fines, reputational damage with examiners, staff burnout from repeated manual research cycles. And most of it, compliance teams address this one of the 2 ways. They either hire more people or they accept slower answers and hope that nothing falls through the cracks. But neither is sustainable, and both are expensive. And in such cases, an obvious solution is AI. You probably have heard about it. You have tried it in ChatGPT on your documents. A basic document search tool, which will work, something a vendor has sold you as a compliance assistant. And at first, it seems to work. For simple questions, it works, it answers, and you're impressed. But for a complex question, that's when it starts failing. One that actually matters to you. And this is where most AI search tools have failure mode that is more dangerous than hallucination. It is called as the confident incompleteness. And it is what this video is about. Now, let me walk you through how a typical AI document search works. Behind the scenes, it is RAG. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So here is what happens when a user asks a question to RAG. The question is converted into a numerical vector, and numerical vector is a mathematical representation of its meaning. The vector gets compared against the vectors in the document library. Then it retrieves the top 3 that are most relevant for the user person. And these top three are sent to a large language model or for the process. And that large language model generates an answer. So which means it is one retrieval pass, one large language model call, and it's done. So that is a typical guide. For single topic, well-phrased questions, this really works well. It also works well for high-volume effective bots, fast internal knowledge search, latency-sensitive applications. So these are typical use cases where it really works. And these are some queries where it shines. For example, what is the net worth ratio for well-capitalized thinkers? What elements are required in PSA in the compliance? What triggers SAR filing and so on. So it is a fast, cheap, and sufficient mechanism to retrieve basic answers for simple questions. But the challenge comes when the answer is not in one place. Here is where the basic RAG starts failing. If you remember the CCO question about their 4.5% net worth, this question spawned across three separate regulatory documents. And these three separate regulatory documents fall under three different clusters, and each of the clusters has its own vocabulary. So when you ask this question to basic RAG retrieves answer from one cluster, it misses the rest of the two, and it presents as a complete answer. And that is where the score reflects it is only 72% accurate, where it missed these three aspects of that question, where it should have looked at net worth, mandatory versus discretionary, and commercial loan origination restriction. This is the compliance hit by asking a basic RAG a question which falls under multiple clusters or multiple documents. So what that means is the most dangerous failure mode is not hallucination, but it is the confident incompleteness. The wrong answer you can catch is a near miss. A confident partial answer you trust, that is a regulatory exposure. And this is where we assume that there is a process which is much better than basic RAG, and we would imagine what if AI could check its own work. For example, if AI searches your documents, what if it then asks, did I find everything this question requires? If it did not find it, what if it rewrote the search with better vocabulary and tried again? And finally, it understood that it got the right answer, and it answered only once it was confident that it had the complete coverage. And that is what is called as agentic RAG. By now, we know the disadvantages or the shortcomings of basic RAG and why there's a need for something better. And that's where we introduce the concept of agentic RAG. And before we go into deep of agentic RAG, let's see a quick demo of how basic RAG and agentic RAG work together. So let's go here and look at the tool that we built, which we're calling it as Compliance Intelligence Assistant. On the top, you see the toolbar, which specifies what is the large language model this tool is using, the embedding model, the database, the agent orchestration framework, agent framework, and a few other tools that are part of this. So here you see the pipeline for basic RAG. The basic RAG receives a user query, then it is passed to a retriever, which will retrieve the relevant chunks for the user query, and pass it to a generator, which is a large language model. And then it produces an answer. So this is the workflow of a basic RAG. Over here, you see agentic RAG, which also takes the user query. But then after taking a user query, it goes through a rewriter, which means the query can be rewritten using a large language model into a better format so that the results can be much more better and qualified. And once the rewriter rewrites the query, it passes to retriever. The retriever gets the relevant chunks from the database and then passes to a grader. So the responsibility of the grader is to look at the insect qualification and grade the results that have been obtained from the retriever. If the grader feels that the retrieved content is not up to the mark, then it will ask the rewriter to retry, and the rewriter will rewrite the query, and it was the loop. Or if the grader finds that the quality of the output is still bad, but then we exhausted the reprice. The reprice can be set by the team, and currently it is set to 6. So let's imagine that after 6 reprice, the grader feeds that this has been, the output has been not up to the mark, then it can still pass, and then that goes through generator. So in 2 cases, when the grader claims that the output is up to the mark and it is qualified, then it goes to the generator and then it produces an answer. So this is how the agentic RAG works. But let us see that in action. So we have been talking about one of the questions in one of the slides about the 4.5% loss, drone losses. And this is that question. The question says, you just got up it on without regional exam. Our next work or network posed at 4.5% last quarter after unexpected drone losses. So this is a question that we review. So let us see in action how the basic RAG versus agentic RAG report in this case. And we are using a scoring profile called compliance grade, which means our agents should prioritize compliance than other factors. Other factors can be speed or cost. So these are the other key profiles. So let's click on run comparison. And what it will do is it will pick up both agentic RAG and basic RAG with the same question, with the same purpose behind the scene. So I'm getting on run. And then as you can see here, the basic RAG is executing that query. And it is using the same purpose behind the scenes, the same data that is part of the purpose. So once it completes, then it goes to agentic RAG. Now, as you can see, the agentic RAG has recovered. And agentic RAG will go through these steps. So as you can see here, this is going through grader here. And grader will identify if the output that is generated is qualified as per the instructions that it has been given. If it finds that it did not qualify, then it sends back to the rewrite. So in this case, it said, okay, the quality of the output is valid. Now it has sent to the generator, and the generator will respond back and give us an answer. Okay, but in total, it took like 52 seconds. And then I can see the basic RAG took about 14 seconds, and the pass is $0012. Whereas agentic RAG took 24 seconds, and the pass is around 0.002 cents, so close to 2.5 times. But as you can see here, to scroll down a little bit further, these are the responses from the basic RAG compared to agentic RAG. But what is more interesting is the scoring mechanism. So here it says one frame could not be sourced in the inbuilt document, but all 16 frames have been supported by the inbuilt document. And the overall score here suggests that basic RAG scored 76 out of 100, whereas agentic RAG scored 96. And as you can see here, the accuracy is high in both cases. Agentic RAG is +7. But the source storage is where it is missing. And this is where it is saying that it is 33 points ahead of basic RAG. And the retrieval, again, the retrieval of the information, and as we said before, it missed two clusters, and that's why the retrieval is low on this graph. But as you can see here, the retrieval for agentic RAG is like close to 50 parts per meter. The latency is higher both, but the pass, as you can see, is higher on the agentic RAG. So this is a view of how we are comparing basic RAG with agentic RAG. And this is the view where you can see how the compliance becomes much more crucial and critical when we are operating in a scenario where the information is spread across various documents and various prospects. So we have seen a live demo of basic RAG and agentic RAG. Let me show you behind the scenes what is happening in plain business terms for this agentic RAG system. So this compliance intelligence assistant takes a question. It understands the person well enough to know what regulatory content it needs. It searches across here the policy documents and the regulatory wrapper. After each search, it grades its own results. It asks, did it find everything what is required for that query? If it did not find everything, then it rewrites the query, and retries if the coverage is incomplete. Only when it is confident that the results are up to the mark, then it writes the answers with citations to source documents. So that's it. There's no magic, but this grading step where it tries to understand if the results are on par with the preset qualifications and it's not rewriting, that makes the magic here. So as seen in the live demo, here is the full architecture of the Retry Counter. The question comes in, the first step is very rewritten. It doesn't search yet. It reformulates the question to be semantically richer and more aligned with regulators of paper. That reformulated query goes through retrieval. It pulls the top 3 chunks of the retrieval database. Those chunks go to the grader. The grader asks, does this retrieve context cover every dimension of the question? If yes, it goes to the answer generator and answer is something. If no, go back to the rewriter, try new vocabulary. That's it. The key is the loop. The system can try up to 6 times and it goes like this stop. So that's the magic. So as seen in the previous slide, the recurrent step is identical to basic RAG. The vector similarity search against DB, top in chunks return. The basic RAG retrieves once and it generates, whereas Agentic RAG retrieves, it grades, it retrieves again reader, it grades again, and finally generates. So the mechanism is the same, both in basic RAG versus Agentic RAG. What is different is the loop. The iteration in the Agentic RAG is what defines the quality of the output. Here we can see the score comparison of Agentic versus basic RAG query by query. Agentic RAG won 8 out of 10 queries. The composite score of basic RAG is about 83%, whereas Agentic RAG is 93%. So there is close to 10-point difference. And when it comes to cost, Agentic RAG is obviously expensive. We see that on an average, $840 per year is the additional API cost for 200 queries for that. Obviously, for compliance team, this is not about budget, but this is about the regulatory risk. So there is something to put in that. Here we can see what use cases we can use basic RAG versus pre-use cases that they can use for Agentic RAG. For internal knowledge serve, we obviously recommend basic RAG. It doesn't straightforward information. But anything coming to compliance or audits, then we would prefer Agentic RAG. When it is FAQ, it is straightforward. Then we use basic RAG. But something like SAR, PCA, multi-threshold queries, or HDMA, pair lending, we would prefer Agentic RAG. And in some cases, it is required too, because the compliance needs are packed. At the same time, real-time customer-facing chat, it's okay to use basic RAG. And for this board reporting or regulatory techniques, Agentic RAG is what is preferred. And finally, if I were building the version 2 of this, then these are a few things that I would really take into consideration. The human readme queue, the high-stakes answers brought to compliance officer before delivery, the immutable audit log. Audit log is the key. Every query, every answer, every source document will test with timestamp and non-editable. And policy version margin, alert when source regulatory documents are updated in the NC register, role-based document access, and approval workflow. So these are few things that would be mandatory in version 3. All right, that brings us to the end of this video. The goal of the system is not to replace compliance analysts, but it is to give them the answers in 25 seconds rather than in 25 minutes. With proper citations, with proper audit trail, and more importantly, with the confidence that the system has looked into all the documents that the question actually required. The full benchmark data can be found in the Claude sphere. The 4-in architecture can be found in this GitHub repo. If you're evaluating compliance AI architecture and want to talk to your specific workflow, you can book a free strategy call. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And that's it. Thanks so much for your time and look forward to talking to you again in the next video. All right. Thank you.